The sound of a woman's broken sobs carried across the dusty Montana plains on that scorching August afternoon in 1882, stopping ranch hand Cole Brennan dead in his tracks as he led his weary horse toward the creek, near the abandoned homestead at the edge of the Bar M territory. Cole had been tracking strays for 3 days straight, his body aching and his throat parched, but something about those cries made him forget his own exhaustion. He tied his gelding to a fence post and approached the weathered cabin cautiously, his boots crunching on the dry earth. Through the open doorway, he could see a woman kneeling on the rough wooden floor, her dark hair falling loose from its pins as she hunched over 2 small wooden cradles, her shoulders shaking with the force of her grief. He cleared his throat gently, not wanting to startle her, but she did not seem to hear him. Cole stepped closer, removing his hat respectfully as he crossed the threshold. The cabin was sparse but clean, with wildflowers wilting in a jar on the table and a quilt draped over a rocking chair. The woman wore a simple calico dress faded from washing, and when she finally looked up at the sound of his footsteps, Cole felt his breath catch at the raw anguish in her eyes. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice rough from days of silence. "Are you hurt? Do you need help?" She stared at him for a long moment, her green eyes brimming with tears that spilled down her pale cheeks. She looked to be about 23 or 24, with delicate features marked by obvious suffering. Her hands clutched the edge of one cradle so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. "They're gone," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Both of them, my babies, they're gone." Cole felt his chest tighten with sympathy. He had seen death plenty of times in his 26 years, out here on the frontier where life was hard and unforgiving, but the loss of children never got easier to witness. He took another step forward, crouching down so he was at her level, his hat still in his hands. "I'm real sorry for your loss, ma'am," he said quietly. "When did it happen?" 3 weeks ago, she said, her voice barely audible. The fever took them both within 2 days of each other. My husband, he couldn't bear it. He rode out 5 days later and never came back. I found his horse wandering near the ravine yesterday, still saddled." She drew in a shuddering breath. "I've been sitting here trying to figure out what to do, where to go, but I can't seem to make myself leave these cradles. It's all I have left of them." Cole's jaw tightened. What kind of man abandoned his wife in her grief? But he kept that thought to himself. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Sarah. Sarah Bennett." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, seeming to notice him properly for the first time. "Who are you?" "Cole Brennan. I work for the Bar M ranch about 10 miles east of here. I was tracking strays when I heard you crying." He glanced around the cabin, noting the nearly empty cupboards, the cold stove. "Have you been eating? Taking care of yourself?" Sarah looked away, her expression answering his question. Cole stood up, making a decision. "Stay here a minute. I'll be right back." He went out to his saddlebags and retrieved the dried beef, hardtack, and canteen he had left. It was not much, but it was something. When he returned, Sarah had not moved from her position by the cradles. Cole set the food on the table and then knelt beside her again. "Miss Sarah, I know you're hurting something fierce right now, but you've got to take care of yourself. Those babies of yours wouldn't want you to waste away like this." "What does it matter?" she said dully. "Everything I loved is gone." "It matters because you're still here, still breathing," Cole said firmly, "and I've learned that as long as you're breathing, there's a reason for it." He paused, then added gently, "Come on now. Let me help you up. You need to eat something and drink some water, then we can figure out what comes next." Sarah looked at him with those grief-stricken eyes, and for a moment he thought she would refuse. But then something shifted in her expression, a tiny flicker of something that might have been the will to survive, and she let him help her to her feet. Her legs were unsteady, and Cole kept a respectful hand on her elbow as he guided her to the table. She ate mechanically, as if the food had no taste, but at least she was eating. Cole stood by the window, giving her privacy while keeping watch. The sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, painting the plains in shades of gold and amber. He knew he should probably ride back to the ranch, report in to the foreman, but something kept him rooted to this spot. Maybe it was the memory of his own mother, who had died when he was 12, leaving him and his father to fend for themselves. Or maybe it was just the fundamental decency that his father had instilled in him before a rustler's bullet had taken him 3 years back. "Thank you," Sarah said after a while, her voice a little stronger. "You didn't have to do that." "Couldn't just ride on by," Cole replied, turning to face her. "Wouldn't be right." He studied her for a moment, then said, "Miss Sarah, I don't mean to pry, but what are you planning to do now? You can't stay out here alone with no supplies and winter coming on in a few months." "I don't know," she admitted, her shoulders sagging. "My family's back in Ohio, but I don't have the money for passage, and I'm not sure I have the strength to face them after everything that's happened. They didn't want me to come west with Thomas in the first place." Cole nodded slowly, an idea forming in his mind. It was probably crazy, but then again, most of the best decisions he had made in his life had seemed crazy at first. "Listen, I know we just met, and you've got no reason to trust me, but I might have a solution. The Bar M is always looking for help with cooking and mending and such. The pay isn't much, but it comes with room and board. You could work there for a spell, save up some money, figure out your next step. It would at least give you a safe place to be while you grieve proper." Sarah looked at him searchingly, as if trying to determine whether he was sincere or had ulterior motives. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her, because she said quietly, "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Maybe that's exactly why," Cole said. "Out here, we look out for each other because there's no one else to do it. And maybe because I know what it's like to lose everything and have to build yourself back up from nothing." They talked until the light faded completely, and Cole learned more about Sarah Bennett. She had married Thomas Bennett 3 years ago in Ohio, full of dreams about building a life on the frontier. They had claimed this homestead 2 years back and had been scraping by, hopeful despite the hardships. When Sarah had given birth to twins the previous winter, a boy and a girl, it had seemed like their prayers had been answered. But the Montana plains could be cruel, and when the fever swept through, it took no prisoners. Thomas had blamed himself for not being able to save them, for not having money for a doctor, and his guilt had apparently driven him to do something desperate and foolish. "I think he meant to come back," Sarah said softly, staring at her hands. "I think he just needed to get away from the pain for a while, but something must have happened. Thomas was a good rider. He wouldn't have just fallen." Cole did not voice his darker suspicions about what might have become of Thomas Bennett. There were plenty of dangers on the plains beyond falling from a horse: outlaws, hostile encounters, wild animals, or simply the vastness of the land itself swallowing a man whole. Instead, he said, "We can send some men out to look for him proper if you'd like. The Bar M has good trackers." "Would you?" Hope flickered in her eyes for the first time since he had found her. "I'll talk to the foreman tomorrow," Cole promised. "But right now, you should try to get some rest. I'll bunk down outside. Keep watch. In the morning, we'll ride back to the ranch and get you settled." Sarah nodded, exhaustion finally seeming to catch up with her. She moved toward the narrow bed in the corner, then paused. "Cole, thank you for not just riding past." "No thanks needed, Miss Sarah. Get some sleep now." Cole spent the night under the stars, his saddle for a pillow and his coat for a blanket. He was used to sleeping rough, and despite the hard ground, he dozed fitfully until dawn broke pink and orange over the horizon. When he went inside, Sarah was already awake, her hair neatly pinned up and her face washed. She looked fragile but determined, and Cole felt a surge of admiration for her strength. They left the homestead an hour later, Sarah riding behind Cole on his horse since hers had apparently gone lame the previous week. She carried a small carpet bag with her few possessions, and Cole noticed that she had placed wildflowers in each of the cradles before closing the cabin door. She did not look back as they rode away, her hands gripping Cole's waist lightly, properly, as the morning sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky. The Bar M Ranch was a sprawling operation with a main house, a bunkhouse for the hands, a cookhouse, barns, and corrals stretching across a valley watered by a clear running creek. The owner, Marcus Henderson, was a fair man who had built his spread up from nothing over the past 20 years. When Cole brought Sarah to meet him, explaining her situation in low tones, while Sarah waited outside the ranch office, Marcus stroked his graying beard thoughtfully. "We could use someone with a woman's touch around here," Marcus said finally. "God knows the cooking has been god-awful since old Betty passed last spring. If she's willing to help with meals and mending, I can pay her $20 a month plus room in the small cabin behind the main house. That fair?" "More than fair, sir," Cole said gratefully. "I appreciate you taking a chance on her." Marcus gave him a knowing look. "You've got a good heart, Cole Brennan, just like your father did. Don't lose that, no matter what this hard land throws at you." Sarah accepted the arrangement with quiet dignity, and by that afternoon she was settled into the small but comfortable cabin that would be her new home. It had a proper stove, a bed with a corn husk mattress, a table and chair, and even a rag rug on the floor. Cole helped her carry in firewood and made sure the pump outside was working properly, then left her to rest while he went to talk to the foreman about organizing a search party for Thomas Bennett. Over the following weeks, Cole watched Sarah slowly come back to life. At first, she moved through her duties mechanically, cooking meals and mending clothes with competent efficiency, but no spark of joy. The ranch hands were respectful, keeping their distance and their tongues in check around the grieving widow. But Cole found himself drawn to the cookhouse more often than necessary, always finding some excuse to check in on her, to make sure she was managing all right. Sarah noticed, of course. She was not blind, and despite her grief, she began to notice the way Cole's eyes softened when he looked at her, the way he always seemed to be nearby when she needed help lifting something heavy or when one of the hands got too rowdy. She did not know what to make of it, or of the strange flutter in her chest when he smiled at her. "You don't have to keep checking on me," she said one evening as Cole lingered after supper, helping her scrub the large pots. "I'm managing fine." "I know you are," Cole said, his hands working steadily in the soapy water. "But there's no law against being friendly, is there?" Sarah felt a smile tug at her lips despite herself. It was the first time she had smiled since before the fever, and it felt strange and disloyal, as if she had no right to feel anything approaching happiness. But Cole's presence was oddly comforting, solid, and steady in a world that had tilted sideways beneath her feet. "No law against it," she admitted softly. The search parties found no trace of Thomas Bennett, despite ranging far across the territory. After 3 weeks, Marcus Henderson gently suggested that they call off the search. Sarah accepted the news with a sad resignation that broke Cole's heart. She was a widow now, officially, even without a body to bury. She laid wildflowers at the edge of the creek and said her private goodbyes, and Cole stood at a respectful distance, his hat in his hands. Autumn arrived with cooler temperatures and spectacular displays of gold and crimson in the cottonwoods along the creek. Sarah had been at the Bar M for nearly 2 months, and the shadows under her eyes had faded somewhat. She still grieved, Cole knew, but she had learned to carry it with her rather than letting it crush her completely. She even laughed occasionally at the hands' jokes during mealtimes, a sound that made everyone in the cookhouse pause and smile. Cole found himself thinking about Sarah more than was probably wise. She was still in mourning, still vulnerable, and he had no business entertaining the feelings that were growing steadily stronger in his chest, but he could not seem to help himself. There was something about her quiet strength, her gentle kindness even in the midst of her own pain, that called to something deep inside him. It was Marcus Henderson who finally gave Cole the opportunity to spend more time with Sarah, though whether the old rancher did it deliberately or not, Cole was never quite sure. In late October, Marcus asked Cole to ride out to check on the horse herd that grazed in the high meadow about 5 miles from the main ranch. One of the mares was pregnant and near her time, and Marcus wanted to make sure she was all right. "Take Miss Sarah with you," Marcus added casually. "She's been cooped up around the ranch for weeks now. The fresh air and change of scenery would do her good." Cole's heart jumped, but he kept his expression neutral. "Yes, sir, if she's willing to go." Sarah was more than willing. She had been feeling restless lately, trapped by the routine and the memories that still haunted her quieter moments. The thought of riding out into the open country, away from the watchful eyes of the ranch hands, was appealing, She changed into a split riding skirt that one of the other women in the area had given her and met Cole at the barn, her eyes brighter than he had seen them in weeks. They rode side by side, Cole on his reliable gelding and Sarah on a gentle mare named Daisy. The day was clear and cool, perfect for riding, and the mountains in the distance were already dusted with early snow. They talked easily as they rode, about everything and nothing. Cole's childhood in Texas before his family had moved to Montana, Sarah's memories of growing up in a small town in Ohio, their favorite books, their dreams for the future. "I always wanted to have a big family," Sarah admitted as they followed the creek toward the high meadow. "A house full of children and laughter. I used to imagine it when I was a girl, reading stories by the fire." Her voice caught slightly. "I suppose that was a foolish dream." "Not foolish," Cole said firmly, "and not impossible either. You're young yet, Sarah. You've got time to build whatever life you want." She glanced at him, something unreadable in her expression. "What about you, Cole? What do you dream about?" He was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "I dream about having a place of my own someday. Not a big spread like the Bar M, but a small ranch where I could raise good horses, maybe start a family. I dream about having someone to share it with, someone strong and kind who understands what it takes to build a life out here." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken meaning. Sarah looked away, her cheeks flushing slightly, and Cole cursed himself for saying too much too soon. But before the awkwardness could settle, they crested a rise and saw the horse herd spread out below them in the meadow, grazing peacefully in the afternoon sun. Cole counted quickly, his practiced eye noting each animal, all present and accounted for. Then he spotted the pregnant mare standing apart from the others, her sides heaving with obvious distress. He swore softly under his breath. "She's in labor," he said, dismounting quickly, "and something's wrong. Stay here, Sarah. This might not be pretty." But Sarah was already swinging down from her saddle, her jaw set with determination. "I helped birth plenty of foals back on our homestead. I can help." They approached the mare slowly, speaking in soothing tones. The horse was a beautiful bay with a white star on her forehead, and she was clearly struggling. Cole examined her carefully, his hands gentle but firm, and his expression grew increasingly concerned. "Twins?" he said finally, looking up at Sarah with worried eyes. "She's carrying twins? That's rare in horses and dangerous. Most times neither foal survives, and sometimes the mare dies too." Sarah felt her heart clench at his words, memories of her own twins flooding back with painful intensity. But she pushed the grief aside and focused on the laboring mare before her. "What can we do?" "I need to help her," Cole said. "The first foal is positioned wrong. I've got to try to turn it or we'll lose them all." What followed was an intense, exhausting hour of work. Cole stripped off his shirt and rolled up his sleeves, working with the mare while Sarah held her head and spoke to her in a low, calming voice. The mare was frightened and in pain, her eyes rolling white, but Sarah's presence seemed to soothe her. Cole worked with practiced efficiency, his face set in concentration, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. Finally, with a gush of fluid and a tremendous effort from the mare, the first foal slipped free. It was tiny and wet, lying motionless on the grass. Cole quickly cleared its nose and mouth, rubbing it vigorously with handfuls of dry grass. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the foal took a shuddering breath and lifted its head, and Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "It's alive," she whispered. "Cole, it's alive." "One down, one to go," Cole said, turning his attention back to the mare. "Come on, girl, you can do this." The second foal came faster, as if encouraged by its sibling's successful arrival. This one was slightly larger and already struggling to breathe by the time it emerged. Cole repeated the process, cleaning and stimulating until the foal responded. Both babies were fillies, delicate and perfect, with their mother's bay coloring and white markings. The mare, exhausted but alive, turned to sniff her babies with obvious wonder. She began to lick them clean, encouraging them to stand on their wobbly legs. Cole sat back on his heels, his chest heaving with exertion, his arms and shirt covered in birthing fluids. He looked at Sarah, and the expression on her face stopped him cold. She was watching the mare with her twins, tears streaming freely down her face now. But her expression was not one of pure grief. There was something else there too. Wonder, hope, and a fierce protectiveness that made her green eyes shine like jewels. "They're beautiful," she breathed. "They're both so beautiful." "They are," Cole agreed softly. "And you helped save them, Sarah. If we hadn't been here, the mare might have died and the foals with her." Sarah tore her gaze away from the horses to look at Cole. He was still kneeling in the grass, covered in sweat and worse, his dark hair falling across his forehead, and she thought she had never seen anyone look so strong or so gentle at the same time. Something shifted in her chest, a crack in the wall of grief she had built around her heart. "You saved them," she corrected quietly. "I just watched." "No," Cole said, standing up and moving closer to her. "You did more than watch. You were brave and calm when I needed help. That mare responded to you, trusted you. That's not nothing, Sarah." They stood there in the meadow as the sun began to sink lower, the new mother and her twins forming a peaceful tableau beside them. Cole wanted to reach out and touch Sarah's face, to wipe away the tears that still glistened on her cheeks, but he kept his hands at his sides. It was too soon, too much. She was still grieving, still healing. But Sarah surprised him. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers small and warm in his, and squeezed gently. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing me here today, for letting me be part of this." Cole squeezed back, his heart hammering in his chest. "Thank you for being here." They stayed with the mare and foals until both babies were standing and nursing, awkward but determined. The sun had set by the time they mounted their horses to ride back to the ranch, and the sky was ablaze with stars. They rode slowly, neither wanting to break the spell of the evening. "Cole," Sarah said as they neared the ranch, "what will happen to the foals? Will Marcus sell them?" "Eventually, probably, Cole said. "Once they're weaned and grown some. Twin foals that both survive are rare. They'll fetch a good price." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, her voice trembling slightly, "Could I buy them? I know I don't have much money saved yet, but I could work extra, pay Marcus overtime. I need to take care of something, Cole. Something living and growing. Those foals, it's like they were meant to be. Does that sound crazy?" Cole's throat tightened with emotion. "No," he said hoarsely, "it doesn't sound crazy at all." He paused, then added, "I'll talk to Marcus tomorrow. I think we can work something out." True to his word, Cole approached Marcus the next morning and explained Sarah's request. The old rancher listened thoughtfully, then nodded. "Tell Miss Sarah the foals are hers, no charge. She's earned them with all the hard work she's done around here, and besides, it sounds like she needs them more than I need the money. She can keep them in the corral near her cabin once they're weaned." When Cole told Sarah the news, she burst into tears and threw her arms around him in an impulsive hug. Cole froze for a second, then carefully wrapped his arms around her, holding her while she cried against his chest. This time, he knew they were not just tears of grief, but of relief and gratitude and the beginning of healing. "I'll take good care of them," Sarah promised when she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'll raise them right, I promise." "I know you will," Cole said gently, "and I'll help you. Teaching you everything you need to know about raising foals, that's going to take time. Hope you don't mind me being around even more than usual." Sarah looked up at him, a shy smile playing at her lips. "I think I could get used to that." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Cole could remember. He and Sarah spent hours together, first visiting the mare and foals in the high meadow, then bringing them down to the ranch when they were strong enough. Sarah threw herself into learning everything about caring for horses, absorbing Cole's teachings like a sponge. The foals thrived under her attention, growing stronger and more playful by the day. Sarah named them Hope and Grace, and watching her with them was like watching someone come back to life. She laughed at their antics, scolded them gently when they misbehaved, and spent long hours brushing their fuzzy coats and talking to them in a low voice that Cole could not quite hear, but that made his heart ache with tenderness. The ranch hands noticed the growing connection between Cole and Sarah, but they were decent enough to keep their observations and knowing grins to themselves. Marcus Henderson watched it all with quiet satisfaction, pleased to see two good people finding comfort in each other. Winter arrived in earnest in early December, bringing snow and freezing temperatures. Sarah had been at the ranch for 4 months now, and the anniversary of her twins' birth was approaching. Cole found her one evening in the corral with Hope and Grace, who were now sturdy enough to weather the cold with their thick winter coats. She was leaning against the fence, her breath frosting in the air, her expression distant. "You all right?" Cole asked softly, joining her at the fence. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Next week would have been their first birthday," she said finally. "My babies. I've been thinking about them a lot lately." Cole did not try to offer empty platitudes. He just stood beside her, solid and present, letting her feel whatever she needed to feel. After a while, Sarah continued, "I think they would have loved these foals. My son, he would have wanted to ride them as soon as he could walk. My daughter, she would have wanted to feed them and brush them and make flower crowns for their manes." She smiled sadly. "I like to imagine it sometimes." "That's not wrong," Cole said. "Remembering them, imagining what might have been, that's part of loving them." "I know," Sarah said. "And I'm starting to understand that I can carry them in my heart and still live my life. That honoring their memory doesn't mean staying frozen in grief forever." She turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You've helped me see that, Cole. You and these foals. You've given me a reason to keep going." Cole's heart was thundering in his chest. "Sarah, He stopped, struggling to find the right words. "You've become real important to me. More than I probably have any right to say, given everything you've been through, but I can't help how I feel. You're brave and kind and strong, and I think about you all the time. I understand if it's too soon, if you need more time, but I wanted you to know." Sarah stared at him, her expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. Then slowly she reached up and touched his face, her fingers cold against his cheek. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "I've been feeling things for you too, Cole, and it scared me. I felt guilty, like I was betraying Thomas and my babies, but I think they would want me to be happy. I think they would want me to live and love again." Cole covered her hand with his own, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. "I will spend every day trying to make you happy," he said roughly, "if you'll let me." "I'll let you," Sarah said, and then she was in his arms, and Cole was kissing her with all the pent-up longing and tenderness that had been building for months. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a long, perfect moment the cold and the grief and the hard world around them faded away. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sarah laughed breathlessly. "The hands are going to talk." "Let them," Cole said, grinning. "I've got nothing to hide. I'm courting you, Sarah Bennett, properly and respectfully, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." They courted through the winter, a courtship that was old-fashioned and proper but filled with warmth and growing love. Cole brought Sarah wildflowers that somehow managed to bloom even in the snow. Sarah mended his clothes with careful stitches and baked his favorite pies. They took long walks together when the weather permitted, and spent evenings in the cookhouse after everyone else had gone, talking by the firelight until the flames burned low. Hope and Grace grew rapidly, losing their baby fuzziness and developing the elegant lines that promised they would be fine horses someday. Sarah doted on them, and Cole loved watching her with them, seeing the joy that had replaced the emptiness in her eyes. By the time spring arrived, Cole knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to marry Sarah. He approached Marcus Henderson on a warm April morning, asking for his blessing and his advice. "About time you asked," Marcus said with a chuckle. "I've been wondering when you'd get around to it. Of course you have my blessing, boy. Sarah's good people, and you two are good together. What do you need from me?" "I want to buy that parcel of land along the Southern Creek," Cole said. "The one you've been thinking about selling. I've got some money saved, and I'll work for you as long as it takes to pay off the rest. I want to build Sarah a house there, start our own place. It's not much, but it's a start." Marcus regarded him seriously. "That's good land, Cole, and I think you've got what it takes to make something of it. We'll work out a fair price, and you can pay me as you're able. I trust you." With Marcus's blessing secured, Cole set about planning his proposal. He wanted it to be special, memorable, something that Sarah would treasure. He enlisted the help of the ranch cook, who helped him pack a picnic basket with Sarah's favorite foods. Then on a Sunday afternoon, when the wildflowers were blooming across the plains in riotous color, Cole asked Sarah to ride out with him to see the land he was hoping to buy. They rode to the Southern Creek, where the water ran clear and cold and cottonwoods provided shade. The meadow was carpeted with lupin and Indian paintbrush, and the mountains rose majestically in the distance. Cole spread a blanket and they sat together, eating and talking and enjoying the warmth of the spring sun. "This is beautiful," Sarah said, looking around with pleasure. "Why haven't we come here before?" "Because I was waiting for the right time," Cole said, his voice suddenly nervous. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Sarah, these past months with you have been the best of my life. You've made me happier than I ever thought possible, and I can't imagine my future without you in it." Sarah's breath caught as Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. It had been his mother's ring, the only thing of value his father had left him when he died. "I know it's not fancy, and I know we haven't been courting for very long by some standards, but out here, life is short and precious, and when you find something worth holding on to, you hold on tight. Sarah Bennett, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here on this land and let me spend the rest of my days making you happy?" Tears were streaming down Sarah's face, but she was smiling, really truly smiling in a way that lit up her entire face. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Cole, I'll marry you. I love you so much." Cole slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply as the wind whispered through the grass and the creek sang its eternal song. Hope and Grace, who had been grazing nearby, whinnied as if in celebration, and Sarah laughed against Cole's mouth, the sound filled with pure joy. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Marcus Henderson giving Sarah away and the ranch hands serving as witnesses. Sarah wore a new dress of pale blue calico that the other ranch women had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers from the meadow where Cole had proposed. Cole wore his best clothes and could not stop grinning as the traveling preacher pronounced them husband and wife. The celebration afterward was raucous and happy, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. But eventually Cole and Sarah slipped away to the small cabin that had been Sarah's home for the past 9 months and was now theirs together. Cole carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and then he set her down gently and looked at her with such tenderness that Sarah felt her heart might burst. "I love you, Sarah Brennan," he said softly. "Every day I'm going to work to deserve you." "You already deserve me," Sarah whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "And I love you too. Thank you for finding me when I was broken and helping me become whole again." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a celebration of their love and their commitment to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, talking quietly about their plans and dreams. Cole told her about his vision for their ranch, about the horses they would raise and the life they would build. Sarah told him about wanting children again someday, if they were blessed with them, and Cole promised that whether they had children or not, they would have a good life together. Summer brought hard work as Cole began building their house on the Southern Creek land. He worked every spare moment, helped by several of the ranch hands who had become genuine friends. The house was modest but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, and a kitchen with real glass windows that Marcus donated. Sarah helped as much as she could, painting and sewing curtains and planting her garden. Hope and Grace, now yearlings, were moved to the new property, along with 2 pregnant mares that Cole had purchased with his savings. They were starting a breeding program, small but promising, raising quality horses that would build their reputation. Sarah threw herself into the work with enthusiasm, her natural affinity for horses serving them well. By the time autumn arrived again, 1 year after Cole had first found Sarah weeping over empty cradles, they were settling into their new home. The house smelled of fresh wood and Sarah's cooking, and every night they fell into bed exhausted but happy, tangled up in each other in their dreams. One cool October evening, Sarah called Cole in from the barn with unusual urgency in her voice. He came running, worried that something was wrong, but when he burst through the door, she was sitting at the table with a strange expression on her face. Part wonder, part fear, part joy. "Cole," she said slowly, "I think I'm pregnant." Cole froze, his heart seeming to stop and then start again double time. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure," Sarah said. "I've been feeling poorly in the mornings, and I'm late, and it's the same feelings I had with the twins." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears. "I'm scared, Cole. I'm so happy, but I'm so scared." Cole crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I'm scared too," he admitted, "but we're going to face it together, whatever happens. We'll get the doctor involved early this time, and we'll take every precaution. And Sarah, no matter what, we have each other. That's not going to change." Sarah clung to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I want this baby so much," she whispered, "but I'm terrified of losing another child. I don't think I could survive it." "You survived before," Cole reminded her gently. "You're the strongest person I know. But you won't have to face anything alone this time. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." The pregnancy was confirmed by the doctor from the nearest town, who visited monthly to check on Sarah. Cole was protective almost to the point of being overbearing, constantly worrying about Sarah overdoing it. But she bore his hovering with patient amusement. The winter was long and cold, but the house was warm and snug, and Sarah spent the dark months knitting tiny clothes and preparing the spare bedroom as a nursery. Hope and Grace, now full-grown and beautiful, seemed to sense Sarah's condition and were gentle around her, nickering softly when she came to visit them in the barn. The 2 mares Cole had purchased both gave birth successfully that winter, producing strong foals that promised well for their breeding program. Spring arrived with a rush of wildflowers and new life, and Sarah's belly grew round and prominent. She was healthy and strong, and the doctor said everything looked good, but both she and Cole held their breath as her due date approached. Cole refused to leave the ranch, even for necessary trips to town, enlisting friends to run errands so he could stay close to Sarah. On a warm May afternoon, Sarah's labor began. The doctor had been staying at the ranch for the past week, anticipating the birth, and he took charge calmly and efficiently. Cole stayed by Sarah's side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead and murmuring encouragement even when she cursed him roundly for getting her into this situation. "You're doing so good, sweetheart," he said as the sun set outside the window. "So good, just a little longer." "I can't," Sarah gasped, exhausted and in pain. "Cole, I can't." "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "You're the strongest woman I know, Sarah Brennan, and you can do this. Our baby is almost here. Just a little bit more." With a final tremendous effort, Sarah pushed, and suddenly a baby's cry filled the room, strong and healthy and indignant. The doctor worked quickly, and then he was placing a squirming, red-faced infant in Sarah's arms. "It's a boy," he announced with a smile, "a healthy baby boy." Sarah burst into tears, holding her son against her chest, feeling his warmth, and hearing his cries with overwhelming relief and joy. Cole was crying too, unashamed, pressing kisses to Sarah's sweaty forehead and reaching out a wondering finger to touch his son's tiny hand. The baby gripped it immediately, his cries subsiding as he seemed to recognize his father's presence. "He's perfect," Cole said hoarsely. "Sarah, he's perfect." "He is," Sarah agreed, gazing down at her son with absolute love. "He really is." They named him James Thomas Brennan after Cole's father and Sarah's late husband, honoring the past while embracing the future. Little James was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. Cole was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor at night when James fussed, singing old cowboy songs in his rough voice until the baby quieted. Sarah bloomed into motherhood, her earlier fears easing as James thrived. She still had moments when the memories of her lost twins would wash over her, bringing tears and grief. But Cole was always there to hold her and remind her that love was not finite. She could love James with her whole heart while still carrying the memory of the babies who had come before. Summer passed in a blur of hard work and new parenthood. The ranch was doing well, with several buyers interested in their horses. Hope and Grace, now mature mares, were both bred to a fine stallion from a neighboring ranch, and the promise of foals from them in the spring had Cole and Sarah both excited. One evening in early autumn, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with baby James asleep in Sarah's arms, Cole reached over and took her hand. "Happy?" he asked softly. Sarah turned to look at him, her husband, her love, the man who had found her at her lowest point and helped her find her way back to life. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the grief and the loss, the cowboy who had refused to ride past her pain, the twin foals that had given her something to nurture and love, and now this new life they had built together. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she said honestly. "You saved me, Cole, you and Hope and Grace. You gave me a reason to keep living when I thought there was nothing left." "You saved yourself," Cole corrected gently. "You made the choice to keep going, to open your heart again. I just got lucky enough to be there when you did." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue, stars beginning to emerge one by one. Inside, Hope and Grace nickered softly from their stalls, the sound mixing with the gentle burble of the creek and the evening songs of birds. The land they had claimed stretched out around them, promising and challenging in theirs. The following spring brought new joy when Hope and Grace both delivered healthy foals, one colt and one filly, within days of each other. Sarah spent hours with the new babies, tears of happiness streaming down her face as she watched them take their first wobbly steps. It felt like a circle completing, a promise fulfilled. The cradles that had once been empty were now filled with the sounds of new life, both human and equine. James was walking by then, a sturdy toddler who loved following his father around and visiting the horses. He had no fear of the animals, and they seemed to recognize him as something precious and to be protected. Sarah often found him in Hope's stall, patting the mare's leg while she stood patiently, her soft eyes watchful. By the time James turned 2, Sarah was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier both physically and emotionally, and Cole was slightly less anxious, though still hovering protectively. In the autumn of 1885, Sarah delivered a healthy baby girl they named Grace Elizabeth, after the foal who had been part of Sarah's healing, and after Cole's mother. Their family was complete, their ranch was thriving, and the love between Cole and Sarah had only deepened with time and shared experience. They had weathered grief and loss, fear and uncertainty, and had come through stronger and more committed than ever. On quiet evenings, Sarah would sometimes take out the small wooden cradles that Cole had carefully transported from the abandoned homestead years before. They were kept in a place of honor in the house, filled now with wildflowers instead of emptiness. She would run her fingers over the smooth wood and think about the babies who had briefly blessed her life, silently thanking them for leading her to this moment, to this life, to this love. Cole understood, in the way that true partners do, that Sarah's first children would always be part of her story, part of what made her who she was. He never asked her to forget or to pretend that those losses hadn't shaped her. Instead, he made sure that James and Grace grew up knowing they had siblings in heaven, understanding that love transcended death, and that families could be bound together across the veil. As the years passed, the Brennan Ranch became known throughout Montana for their quality horses and for the couple who ran it with integrity and kindness. Hope and Grace produced several more foals over the years, each one carefully raised and trained. James grew into a fine young man who shared his father's gift with horses and his mother's compassionate heart. Grace became a spirited, intelligent girl who could outride most of the boys in the territory and who adored the twin mares she had been named after. Cole and Sarah grew older together, their love weathering time and hardship and joy in equal measure. They added onto their house as needed, welcomed grandchildren when James eventually married, and continued to work the land they loved. Every spring, they would ride out to the meadow where they had saved Hope and Grace all those years ago, renewing their vows to each other under the vast Montana sky. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Cole took Sarah's hand as they stood on the porch of their home, watching their grandchildren play in the yard while the horses grazed peacefully in the pasture. Grace Elizabeth, now 15, was teaching her little nephew to feed carrots to Hope, who was elderly now but still gentle and patient. 20 years, Sarah said softly, leaning against Cole's shoulder. Can you believe it? Best 20 years of my life, Cole said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the parts where I was impossible and grieving and broken, Sarah asked with a small smile. Especially those parts, Cole said seriously, because those were the parts that led us here. Every moment of pain, every tear, every struggle, it all mattered. It all meant something. Sarah turned to look up at him, her green eyes still as beautiful as the day he had first found her weeping over empty cradles. I love you, Cole Brennan. Thank you for not riding past. Thank you for stopping and helping and giving me a reason to live again. Thank you for letting me, Cole said, cupping her face in his weathered hands. Thank you for being brave enough to love again, to trust again, to build this life with me. They kissed then, a kiss full of history and promise, of loss overcome and love triumphant. Around them, their family and their land and their dreams made manifest bore witness to the truth that healing was possible, that love could bloom even in the aftermath of tragedy, and that sometimes the greatest gifts came wrapped in the humblest packages. A cowboy who refused to ride past suffering, and twin foals who taught a grieving woman how to hope again. The Montana sky stretched endless and blue above them. The mountains stood eternal in the distance, and the creek sang its ancient song. The cradles that had once been empty were filled now with memory and meaning, with flowers and love and the understanding that nothing was ever truly lost. The babies Sarah had mourned were woven into the fabric of the family she had built, their brief lives giving depth and gratitude to every moment that followed. And as the sun set on another day at the Brennan Ranch, painting the world in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah and Cole stood together on the porch they had built with their own hands, surrounded by the life they had created from ashes and grief and stubborn hope. The foals that had saved her had grown into magnificent mares who had given them a livelihood and a legacy. The cowboy who had found her weeping had become her husband, her partner, her home. It was a good life, hard-won and deeply cherished, and as Sarah rested her head on Cole's shoulder and watched her grandchildren laugh in the fading light, she sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving for second chances, for the healing power of love, and for the day a dusty cowboy had heard her crying and decided that some things were more important than reaching your destination on time. Hope and Grace, the twin foals who had bridged past and future, grief and joy, stood in their pasture, their coats gleaming in the sunset. They had been part of a miracle, witnesses to the truth that love could resurrect what seemed dead, that empty cradles could be filled again, not with forgetting, but with the courage to embrace new life while honoring what had been lost. And in the house behind Cole and Sarah, those original wooden cradles sat filled with wildflowers, a testament to the babies who had led their mother through darkness into light, and to the man who had loved her enough to help her find her way home.